Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where you might recall a year or so ago, everyone was raving. Well, by everyone, I mean everyone like in animation circles. But I mean, if you were really keyed into the movie scene, you heard about this new animated movie out of Japan, an anime called Your Name, which was so hot, both critically and financially in the Japanese box office. It also did extremely well in China. That people were saying that the writer-director of that film, Genki Kawamura, was the new Miyazaki, Studio Ghibli and all that. They were like, the mantle has been passed. And we were all very excited for it to come to the United States and there was hope that it would be an awards contender for Best Animated Feature. It ended up never even being nominated, despite being released for a qualifying run. And it was released in the United States in the new year, the beginning of 2017, but really nobody saw it. And that's for a very obvious reason. Now, and many of you remembered the comment that I made when I reviewed the film. I reached out to the distributor. I said, can I have a streaming link? I really want to review this film and, be able to help call attention to it. And it was just as good as everyone was saying it was. But in my review, I said, my inner Hollywood executive is crying out to remake this as a live-action English language movie. And I said for two reasons. One, and then I said I brought it up for two reasons. One, that it's just so good and it feels very realistic and live-action-y because of the quality of the animation. But also, I mentioned it because I wanted to encourage people to see the movie. I was like, it's so good that I think Hollywood's going to remake this, and you should see it. You should see the original. You should be one of those moviegoers who knows the full story. But I feared that Hollywood would ignore the film and hope that it went unnoticed with the hopes of remaking it themselves. And that's exactly what happened. Nobody pushed the film, nobody pushed it, nobody called attention to it during awards season, except for a couple of us, online, who I guess are a little bit more independent minded than some of the, the old school traditional entertainment press. Nobody in the industry said, hey, you should pay attention to this movie, which just shows how important the Disney connection has been for Studio Ghibli. There was really no support for it when it was eventually released. And if you would like to watch it even now, you can't. You have to wait because the Blu-ray isn't being released until November of this year. You can go and pre-order it on Amazon. It comes with the original Japanese dialogue with English subtitles. That's how you should watch it. And I highly recommend that you watch it when it becomes available. But it's just ridiculous that it would take a year for it to even hit the United States. And I feel this is just something that Hollywood does. They don't want anyone in the West to really be familiar with these films because they want to remake them and have the biggest audience, right? It happens time and time again. Now they wanted to do it with The Raid. Thankfully, that remake has never gotten made. The Untouchables, the biggest film to ever come out of France. Hardly anybody saw it in the United States because, again, it was, I believe, intentional. That's being remade with Bryan Cranston and Kevin Hart. And we'll talk about the quality of these films in just a second. Tony Erdmann, huge hit. Also out of Europe. It was an Oscar contender. It's being remade with Jack Nicholson and Kristen Wiig. And then also A Man Called Ove, which many people raved about last year, perhaps best well known for competing with Suicide Squad in Best Makeup and Hair, right? But that was just, they just made a deal to remake that with Tom Hanks in the lead role. And it's sad because nobody sees the original foreign films, and these remakes are rarely as good and rarely as successful as the films that are being remade. So the U.S. kind of misses out on this like global event with the original film, and it's like we have to have our own party. I just don't like that. I think that some rare exceptions are films being remade out of Asia. The Departed was a remake, The Ring and The Grudge. But for the most part, it just doesn't turn out. Now, JJ Abrams, he started to make it up to Paramount for going back to Disney to make Episode 9. Of course, Paramount is supposed to be his new home, and he's given them this. And so Paramount and JJ Abrams will produce. Some of you feel JJ Abrams is directing. He's not going to direct because he's making Star Wars Episode 9. But he's going to produce through Bad Robot. And then also Toho and the original writer-director, Genki Kawamura, will be involved. But, that doesn't always work out. Look how Godzilla turned out, right? Toho apparently doesn't have as much, well, I don't know. I mean, maybe they're a little gun shy. Maybe they're like, oh, West versus Eastern audiences. We should let Hollywood take the lead. It's like, have you seen your original movie? It's very good. You should have more faith in your creative contributions. And then interestingly, they've gotten the screenwriter from Arrival to do the adaptation, the English language adaptation, which makes me feel they're going to focus very heavily on the science aspects of the story. Maybe to give it a little bit more of a, less of like a young adult adaptation feel, you know, like a John Green novel. And, you know, that did well with Fault in Our Stars, but then of course with Paper Towns, you know, it fell away. So they're like, let's play up the science aspect of it, and then maybe people will take this movie as seriously as they did the original in Asia. But I think the real problem is going to be casting on two fronts. One, you don't want it to seem like a cheap remake, right? Or some like cheap, you know, teen romance that people shouldn't pay attention to. That's one hurdle. Then, of course, there's the whitewashing hurdle. How are you going to handle this? It's been a big problem for a lot of films, most recently Ghost in the Shell and also Death Note. Now, they're going to obviously change the setting to the United States, I would assume, you know, because it's an English language film coming out of Hollywood. But I would think maybe one of the leads should be Asian. You know, some people might be like, why does this matter? Why do you care? Well, let me explain it to you. I think it's important because a lot of American audiences never have any idea. It's the same reason it's like it's horrible when you whitewash real figures, right? Or you don't tell, you know, diverse stories. Entertainment often shapes the way people see other groups and how groups see themselves. So this really feeds into the narrative that only the West comes up with good ideas. And by whitewashing a movie and totally stripping it of any of its Japanese-ness, people will maybe probably see your name and be like, wow, JJ Abrams does it again. That screenwriter Arrival sure is talented. Instead of like, wow, what about Genki Koromura? That guy's so good. You know, I think you know, that's I think really the hurdle, and that people just don't realize, you know, and that's where you get people stepping forward and saying, oh, well, the West leads the way and we come up with all the good ideas and we are the ones who know best what we're doing. And that's, you know, that's not true. I mean, there's you know, there's highs and lows in every community. So I just feel that's one of the problems. Also, I also feel a little bit bad for animation, and I hope that the live action movie can introduce the same magical dreamlike quality that the original has, thanks to its animation. So, but you know, you can do a lot obviously with visual effects today. So but I hope they realize that's an important part of why that movie was so special. So watch it on November 7th. I think it comes out November 2017. Please don't just wait for the English remake. All right, so the next story of the day, this actually is another whitewashing potential problem. This is Denis Villeneuve's, apparently he's really close to signing to do Sony's Cleopatra. Now his star continues to rise. I liked him since Prisoners. I thought Prisoners was a fabulous movie. I saw it twice. It's a very long movie. And the second time I saw it, people like walked out of it. And I was like, ooh, but I like it. Oh, well, I guess it's not for everyone. It's Hugh Jackman, Jake Gyllenhaal. Very, very good movie. But Arrival, of course, was really what kind of like sent him into turbo drive. I had major problems with Arrival, but of course I respect its success and what it's done for the careers of everyone involved. We just talked about that screenwriter getting another gig. And of course, Denis Villeneuve is about to launch Blade Runner 2049. Very curious to see how that does. So now he's in talks for Sony's Cleopatra, a very infamous project, not only because it's taken so long to do. By the way, the original with Elizabeth Taylor is actually very, very good. It's like one of the first blockbusters. I actually watched it in film school. It's a very good movie. You know, obviously it has some problems. It was made in a different era, but I just think from a quality of storytelling and you know, pomp and circumstance, it's good. I think if you want to know Hollywood history, you should watch the original Cleopatra. Also, it was like one of the first big paydays. Elizabeth Taylor, they really wanted her to be Cleopatra. I think the studio was Fox, and they said, please be Cleopatra. And she's like, I don't want to do it. And they said, well, so then she said, I'll do it for $1 million, because she was like, I don't want to do it, so I'm going to give them a ridiculous number. And then to her surprise, they came back and said, we'll pay you that. And so she had to do it. But, you know, she was one of the first actors to get paid like a ridiculous payday. So it's very important in that regard as well. Also, the romance that blossomed between her and Richard Burton, and there was like a lot of tabloid stuff surrounding the movie as well. It was one of the first of those kind of productions too. So there's a lot going on both on camera and off camera with Cleopatra. So anyway, this movie is infamous because you might recall at the Sony leak, there was an email from Scott Rudin. And Scott Rudin said horrible things about Angelina Jolie, who was supposed to star as Cleopatra at the time, and was giving them a real problem because she was supposed to have director approval. And she was apparently quite finicky, and she really wanted, for instance, David Fincher, who you might recall was momentarily associated with the film. So that leaked, that email leaked. I doubt that Angelina Jolie is still attached to this. And also, her Bride of Frankenstein deal that she was rumored for never came through. She's apparently, I don't know if she's genuinely sick or not. Angelina Jolie is a master of tabloid manipulation. And it backfired. It blew up in her face recently twice with the Brad Pitt slander when she tried to take his kids away from him, and all of Hollywood was like, too far, Angelina. And then they clearly sided with him. And then also she tried to do damage control of that with her Vanity Fair interview, and then it was revealed that she was playing like what many felt was a cruel game and trying to cast kids in her movie for Netflix. And that was a horrible thing. I think she threatened to sue Vanity Fair about it, actually, and I'm not quite sure how it was resolved, but I don't think her stock is particularly high right now. So Amy Pascal, also while she was fired from Sony, she still has a producing deal there, and she's attached to this as well. It's interesting that Villeneuve would want to work with those two, considering what happened in this project. But maybe people are saying he rises to the challenge. He already is doing Dune, and this would go after that. Now, whoever they do cast as Cleopatra, they have a real problem, and that it was historically proven that Cleopatra had, was a person of color. On the scale, what level, I think that's up for debate, but she wasn't Caucasian. So, as she's often been depicted in popular entertainment. It's a little bit like the Jesus situation. So, I'd be curious to see how Sony and Denis Villeneuve seems to me pretty good about this stuff. I don't know what he would do, but I think this movie will be DOA if they cast a Caucasian actress in the role of Cleopatra. All right, so speaking of Sony, the Venom movie continues to come together, and it's great to see Tom Hardy heading up something where he's going to be the lead in a commercial film, something actually he has never done. Even when he is supposed to technically be the lead, he doesn't talk like in Mad Max, or he has a mask on his face like when he was Bane, and he's done a lot of small roles, but I don't think we've really had Tom Hardy in a Hollywood man leading role. Although we don't know what this movie is going to be like. And I think there's a big question mark on that because of the cast, the caliber of the cast that they're assembling. In the coverage, it seems that Riz Ahmed did land the role, so yay, I'm very excited about that. And now the latest is that Michelle Williams is in talks to co-star. She usually does small movies as well, but she's done some commercial fare like Oz the Great and Powerful. I thought she did an okay job there. She came across very likable. And she's in the upcoming Greatest Showman. But I think that to her, the draw is the rest of the cast, working opposite Tom Hardy, working with Riz Ahmed, and that'll probably be a draw for the audience as well. So this is very exciting. I'm curious to see what they're doing with Venom, that they want actors of this caliber, and that the project interests actors of this caliber. There's got to be something interesting there. I also want to see what Michelle Williams' role is. I hope she's not doing the typical female supporting role in this type of movie. That would be unfortunate. Now, as for the viewer question of the day, this comes from Lou Mertens. And Lou Mertens says, Grace, I need some grace. My wheel is squeaking louder than the chipmunks. That's so hilarious. All right. So first the question, then the context. What are the different guilds and why do they have so much power over credits in movies? So Lou says, I saw in a video lately that Joss Whedon is getting a writing credit on Justice League from the Writers Guild because he wrote 30% of the script, quote unquote. But he doesn't get co-director credit because the Directors Guild doesn't allow multiple directors. Even the Coen brothers aren't credited together. This seems really backwards to me. I think the Coen brothers are credited together. But anyway, this seems really backwards to me, but also a good segue into my question. What are the different guilds, again, and why do they have so much power over the credits? I would love to hear from you, and I love the live stream. I watched Wonder Woman live with you guys on Sunday. I love hearing your feedback, and I found it aligned with mine. Love from the Netherlands. Oh, hello, Lou Mertens. Great question. So the guilds cover all the different creative areas in the industry, right? So there's the big guilds are like the Screen Actors Guild, the Writers Guild, the Directors Guild, the Producers Guild, and there's an Art Directors Guild, which does costume design, set design, etc. And then there are just a lot of unions. And the reason that you have unions is to have contracts with the studios, to have a level of pay that's guaranteed, just to make sure that you're protected in that regard. That's called scale. The studio has to at least pay you that much. And you can see there are strikes. They threaten strikes. With the Writers Guild, that was an infamous, very damaging strike to make sure that they get what they want. And that's the power of the guilds. And the reason is that you can't cross the picket line. I know sometimes I'm sure it's difficult for talent to, they really want the gig, but they have to, the guilds protect them, so therefore the guild has the power to go on strike because all the talent will go along with it because they're guild members, and therefore that's what gives them the power with the studios. Now the guilds serve a very, it's just like in a factory, or any industry where the workers are unionized, and it's a love-hate relationship. Sometimes people feel, oh well, the union pushes too hard and they ask for too much, and it's prohibitively expensive and it hurts the company that they're negotiating with. But a lot of times, sadly, we've seen that if companies are left unchecked, they will just take all the money for themselves and they won't do anything for their employees. And I guess to some degree, talent is an employee because they're under contract with the studio. So it's really important. You just have to have unions. It's a necessary evil dealing with an entity that sometimes acts evilly. So what they do is they protect talent. They make sure they get a certain level of pay at least. Not only in terms of the rate, but also, how many hours, overtime, when that kicks in, also how the talent is treated, and then also credit. That's a very important thing because you can't, if you have too many screenwriters, who really wrote the final script? It's detrimental to the careers of everyone involved. The same thing with the director. There can only be one director on a film. Who knows what the studios might come up with someday, but the Directors Guild wants to make sure that that's protected. So you don't have to worry about the studio. For instance, the studio could fire you, let's say, if that wasn't a rule, and bring on another director like they did with, Ron Howard, right? And so it keeps the studio from doing that really a lot because it's so embarrassing for the movie and because it would be a credits issue, right? And that would be like it's going to be a big brouhaha. I mean, and I think without that rule, you can see a studio going, you'll still get credit. Let's just have 2 directors on the movie or 3 directors, whatever, as long as the movie turns out, right? Isn't that what's really important? And then you just have like piecemeal crap that comes out because, a lot of times the studio, I guess it's also to maybe protect the artistic interests of a property as well and creative voices. So it's very, very important. And I know sometimes it seems unfair when people don't get the credit. But that's called paying your dues and working your way up the system. Sometimes unions are corrupt too, so that's an issue that has to always be addressed and kept an eye on. But for the most part, it works. It's no system is perfect, and this is the system that exists in many businesses, including Hollywood. So that's why they exist, and that's why it's important what they do, and that's why they limit the number of people who can be credited on a project. All right, and also if you're not going to get a credit, unless you're really trying to work your way up, maybe you wouldn't take the job, right? They have to protect that as well and keeping other talent from cannibalizing each other. It's just a lot of problems. All right, so anyway, that's today's morning movie news. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Please write down below, I think, today's top 3 stories, Lou's viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions, of course, that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.